Moving to housing affordability, I mean, my own type of view is if you're a younger Australian and you want to buy a house, even we're in Newcastle at the moment, I was looking at a suburb just up the hill, suburb called Garden Suburb. I was just randomly looking on that online the other day. It's 800 to 1.1 to knock on the door, right?
Yeah.
Now, if someone was closer to a major city or in an area where they needed 1.2 million to buy their first home, even if housing prices fell 15%, that younger Australian, their problems don't go away because whether it's a million or 1.2 for most people, it's a non-starter at the moment. So what's the deal with housing in Australia, and what have you seen that the government is actually doing about it? My own kind of anecdotal vibe when I look at this, all governments now are actually talking about the supply issue.
Yep.
Where there was a period of years where they were trying to blame tax, trying to blame everything else, not actually going, no, it's actually a supply issue. So where are we, is this just the new normal? Because I think if you're saving to get your first home, all the stuff the government's doing, this problem isn't solved in 3 years.
No, it's not. And I think governments are right. It's been a long time coming, but you're finally starting to see governments start to talk more about supply and start to move on increasing supply and making it easier to build new supply. Unfortunately, a lot of this is very much out of control of the federal government, given that a lot of these sort of decisions tend to be very much state and local based. And certainly, when I talk for my sins to people who work in the building trade and some friends who are architects, and what some of them say about dealing with certain local governments is frankly not fit to print. There is certainly more we could do to make more supply easier, make it easier to build more supply, because that's certainly what we need. We're short of homes quite dramatically, but you're right, we can't solve this problem in 3 years. The other angle I'd say is that when you look at the overall data on first home buyers, the percentage of new loans going to first home buyers, it's not exactly ridiculously high, but it's not historically low either. It's about average, which says that there are clearly first home buyers out there that are able to buy, but herein lies the problem. Your ability to be a first home buyer depends on the genetic lottery of life. If you have the right parents or grandparents or both, then you're a perfectly credible first home buyer. If you don't have the right parents or grandparents, then your hope of buying a new home, your first home, certainly within cooey of a major city, is pretty remote indeed. And it's pretty tragic that that's the kind of country we've become, where your ability to be a homeowner depends on who your parents were or who your parents are. The other story here is the rental market. What can we do to boost supply in the rental market, and in particular to change the dynamics of the rental market? For example, if I had a young family and I was renting, and the best I could do was a 6 or 12 month lease, and I've got kids of school age, does this mean I'm potentially going to have to move schools every 12 months at the whim of a landlord? So giving people more security of tenure through the ability to sign longer term leases, or maybe, and I think we're seeing some more discussion about this, institutionalising the ownership of rental property. So that rather than having a private landlord making decisions that can affect your security of tenure, you might have a large institution or a corporate entity that actually owns a block of rental apartments.
Has ART, with your ART hat on, has there been chatter of ART buying an apartment building and just literally building one from scratch, and the super fund owns it, and that's part of the investing pool of
We've
the
certainly
member
looked
assets?
at it, but in Australia we found it very, very hard to stack up.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's not the responsibility of ART or its members to make up for decades of government failure in housing policy. But, if there was a way that we could help increase the supply of rental property and still generate an attractive commercial rate of return, we'd absolutely look at that. But certainly, and give you an example, in the United States, where we absolutely invest in what's called multifamily residential, where an institution or pool of capital owns a rent. Might be a fairly large development where all the houses or apartments are built to rent. And that means it gives people security of tenure, long-term leases, etc. It means that the owner can invest and maintain the property more easily. So there is a scope for that internationally. It's a fairly major
but it's just
asset
the
class.
cost of investment in Australia.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to land values, especially in our major cities, and the cost of building, and also the tax system. So housing being GST exempt, but you still have to pay GST on the building cost, for example. So we and certainly we have done. We've dipped our toe in the water in social housing by providing some debt funding to a development in Queensland. But that was in partnership with the Queensland government to sort of underwrite a big chunk of the risk involved. So we'd certainly look at we're absolutely willing to look at investment opportunities. But as I said, it's got to be in the members' best financial interests. It's got to deliver a commercial rate of return. The discussion is ongoing, but certainly we haven't been active in that space just yet.
Does ART have a view on whether the government should allow people to take money out of their super fund to put into a first home?
I think the way I would describe it is it's any measure where you put more money into people's pockets so that they can pay for home. All you're doing is boosting demand. We've tried this for decades with first homeowners grants and the like. All you end up doing is increasing demand for housing, forcing prices up further. And the way it ends up working is that you end up with an indirect transfer of wealth from your retirement fund to the vendor of the property. Unless you do something about supply, we're going to be in this same merry-go-round. I just think that measures to boost demand, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Demand measures have actually made the problem worse on balance over the last 20 years plus. And so we've got to do something to address supply, really.
So you're a distinguished economist and gentleman.
Kind of you to say.
Well, you're welcome. You've got children probably in around that first home.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the discussions that you're having with them, knowing that you've got a seat at the economic table, as in you totally are across what's happening on a family front? Like, what are the discussions been like with your kids?
Well, I think they are certainly in that boat. My daughter is 25, my son is 23, and they are actually saving because they want to get on the property ladder, absolutely. My wife and I both said that we are simply going to have to help them out as much as we can without jeopardising our own long-term retirement. That's retirement future. But certainly I think my children they're better placed than many, but they're certainly aware that it's going to be a struggle for them to get their first home. And they're having a good go at it.
Yeah.
These conversations are live. There's another way of thinking about this too. I think we might have talked about this in a previous call too, Glenn, that the political appetite to do something about it depends on the views of the median voter. What does a typical voter want politicians to do? And unfortunately, the median or typical voter out there is at this stage not a renter. They are either paying off a home or they own their home. And so the median voter is very, very wary of any policy that is actually going to potentially drive down the value of their property. And even when you look at our political class, we look at it where our politicians invest their money, a lot of them are landlords, and that's both sides of politics. And so until that political dynamic shifts, it perhaps means that progress towards doing something about this is going to be slower than we'd like.
Hey, it's Glenn here. Thank you so much for watching today's video. You made it to the end. Can I ask a favor? Can you hit that like button and maybe hit subscribe if you want to get notified when we release further videos just like this one, whether you watch the Money, Money, Money podcast or Retire Right. And remember, if you want to learn more about investing, I've got an investing book, The Quick Start Guide to Investing, and there's a link in the description to get your hands on a copy. Thank you so much. Bye.